This young fella, one of his first memories is of rats. And he slept with his covers over his head until the age of 26. He couldn't break that habit because he was afraid the rats would eat him because of the neighborhood he grew up in. He also had a good friend next door who he used to hang out with. His father one day said, "Listen, you can't hang out over there anymore." Come to find out later, the reason why is because that guy had an intruder and he shot and killed him. So this is the kind of neighborhood. They thought he was mentally handicapped till about year 3 in grade school. Then they gave him an IQ test. He tested out as a second-year university student. So they figured there might be something there. About that time, he got big Coke bottle glasses. This is probably a fair representation of what he looked like at the time. Because of that, obviously, he got wailed on a lot. He got beat up all the time, wasn't a very popular kid, had a big mouth. And some of his memories of getting wailed on include getting tomatoes thrown at him by the Kirkman brothers. Another thing he told me about was where he didn't come home from school one day. His father went driving out to try to find him and found him bleeding in a snowbank after dark, because that's where he got beat up and left. His father was kind of a hard guy, and one time he told me about how the 2 kids that were twins that were in year 11, I think he said, and he was in year 7, came to his house, knocked on the door, said, "We're here to kick your son's butt." But they didn't say butt, obviously. So anyway, his father wasn't one of these guys that taught him to hide from problems, so he made him go out and fight both of them at the same time. He remembers trying to drown the younger, weaker one by 5 minutes, because they were twins, in this little rain catch by the house, but the other one came up from behind, clocked him. Fight ended with one of the brothers sitting on his chest, punching him, the other one holding his arms. So anyway, about that time he developed asthma, another reason to get beat up. And then he went to an allergist. He went to this, actually before that, I'll tell you real quick. He decided he'd had enough of getting beat up. And he read about Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt was president of the United States, but he also was a physical weakling as a child. And what his dad did, who was rich, is he built this gym in his house and exercised his kid and exercised his kid and exercised his kid until eventually he trained out of the asthma. So this guy read about it. He said, "Oh, I'll do the same thing, but without the rich father." So that's what he did. So he started doing push-ups one day, did 2 push-ups, had an asthma attack. His dad had to take him to the hospital for an adrenaline shot. All right? A couple days later, did the same thing, got all the way up to 5, had another asthma attack, had to take him to the hospital again. Did it again and again and again, but was building it up. 10, 15, 20 push-ups. Eventually, his father said, "Had enough, don't care, have another asthma attack. You can die, we'll just make another one that looks like you for free." So his mother was more attached to him because, he figured out she carried him in his stomach for 9 months. You got to plan a funeral, that's expensive, a lot of work, got to invite all the relatives. Big hassle, better to let the kid live, so she took him to an allergist. If you go to the allergist, what they do is they put little allergens in that needle and then they put them on your arm. And then when your arm swells up, you're allergic to it. Well, they did that with him. Both his arms swelled up so bad, the data was useless. They had to do the test 3 times and dilute it 3 times before they could get results that made any sense. The doctor said, "Well, your kid's allergic to everything. He's kind of a wimp, but one thing he could do is he could try to swim. It's good for his cardiovascular, blah, blah, blah." Only problem is, kid didn't know how to swim. So he goes after the swim team year 11. Guess what? The team was so bad, no one got cut. So he's swimming in the little kiddie pool with water up to his belly button or chest or whatever. Other kids making fun of him because he's swimming in the kiddie pool with like the 4-year-olds. Eventually learns how to swim after a couple months, gets moved into lane 8. And swimming, the fastest person's in lane 1. The ones that's, and it goes all the way to 8 is the worst. And they have a floating lane line in lane 8. They made him swim in that lane because they figured he was still a drowning risk. So he could grab onto that and the school wouldn't get sued. Eventually, by the end of the year, because he practiced twice as much and twice as hard as everybody else, he ended up getting elected at the last practice as captain of the team for the next year. And a little bit after that, had an Olympic trial in the 100 and 200 meter butterfly. Then he decided to go to West Point Military Academy. Got a congressman and a senator to nominate him to go. Aced the physical fitness test, aced the academic tests, graduated first in high school, had National Honor Society, was an Eagle Scout, all this other stuff, but failed the eye exam. Wah, 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 wah. So didn't get in. So within 2 hours, he was accepted to the military institute that wasn't federally run, the best one the states run. And went there, graduated top of his class, went out for the boxing team, and the reason he had to go out for the boxing team is because at that school you had to take boxing to graduate. If you didn't pass it, you didn't graduate. It's a military school. He was so used to getting beat up that he was not afraid of anything. So the coach goes, yeah, you should go out for the team even though you don't know anything, but you're not afraid of nothing. So anyway, went to school there. The only problem with that school, though, is it cost about $35,000 a year. His dad made $40,000. He ended up having to get a job. He had an athletic scholarship and was taking 21 contact hours a semester, then had military obligations. Ended up with a lot of debt because parents couldn't help out. When he graduated, he had about, in today's dollars, I figured it out, about $150,000 in debt. Paid it off in 1 year when he opened his first business. Was pretty successful at that for a while. His broker kept going, hey, you know what? You should get into this .com stuff. It's great. He kept putting it off. It's a fad. It won't work. It won't work. Got into it 2 weeks before it crashed. So, dun, 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 back to debt. So then he got sent over to a foreign country to set up operations for another company. Did that for a while. Built it from 0 to 31 locations. Up at the top again. Then what happened? Well, he kept telling the owners in the United States that, hey, listen, this country's a little bit different laws. If you don't do things right, the way they want them to do them, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a problem. So what happened? ACCC. You've heard of them, right? Undertakings. Woo-woo. So, bum, 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 bum. So anyway, stuck with that business, fixed it, got it through all that, and still had the highest productivity of the company, still had the highest sales in the company at that point. And then anyway, left that business, started his own business with no experience in an unrelated industry because he had a no-compete clause when he left the other business. And built that to 13 locations. Then he was getting cheated by suppliers in this country. Nobody's had that happen, right? Where you get cheated by suppliers? Nobody? So decided, hey, if he's going to get cheated by suppliers in Australia, might as well go to Asia and get cheated for less. Right? So he went to Asia. Guess what? Not the first white guy to get cheated. Bum, bum, bum. Lost about $1 million on one deal. Caused a lot of problems. He had 13 locations that were distributors, so he became, instead of their support network, their debtor basically, because he felt it was his fault. He's financing all these people. Eventually lost it all. Ended up at close to $2.7 million in debt. Which, is that more than you made last week?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. I don't think it's
I
don't think it's as much as Charles made last week.
Oh, hell no.
Okay. All right, but anyway, so then what he did is he kept banging away, got out of the debt, said, hey, these guys in China cheat me, so I'll start my own factory even though I have no clue about manufacturing. Did that, back to success. Yay! And then these are the countries he ended up exporting in to, the purple ones. So there's 26 there. And then during that time, he had trouble with consumer affairs. He was audited 4 times. I forgot, he had identity theft to the tune of $1.5 million. It went on for 20 years. And believe it or not, this is funny, it started on April 1st. I thought that was pretty, yeah, it's important to, when you're going to rob somebody, make it funny. Had issues with the Fair Work Ombudsman. Was investigated by ASIC. That's something on your to-do list, isn't it, Moses? No, it's not? Okay. Had somebody die in his place of business. That was one of those great hits that keep coming. Was on Today Tonight. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. And what else? Oh, had employee theft. One of them stole $250,000. Another one stole about $100,000. And another one stole the $100,000. So, yeah, that's not on your list of things to do either, is it, Kirk? I wasn't sure, but I just wanted to double check. So, obviously, you guys have figured out by now that's me. Okay? And why did I tell you all this? I hate going over this stuff because it is obnoxious and boring. But the point is, so when I tell you the rest of this stuff, I'm not just saying, you know, you can overcome adversity. And then at the end, I go home and cuddle up in the fetal position and suck my thumb. That's the point of all that. And this is the second of a 3-part series. Unfortunately, if you missed the first session, I feel bad for some of you because that one was geared, at least half of it was geared towards people that have over 25 employees. People and how to manage the team through adversity. And I know a lot of the people here today, like Rudo and Cece and Charles, have multiple employees, and you missed out on that. I can get you the recording if you want. The second part is more of a getting your own head straight part. And I'm going to tell you when I learned one of the first keys to overcoming adversity. And in cinema, they have this thing called suspension of disbelief. Have you heard of that? Yeah. Where you're watching a movie and Superman starts flying. Now you have to wake up. This is the part you haven't heard. Superman starts flying, and you go, oh, okay, it's Superman. I can buy into that. That's a cinematic concept known as suspension of disbelief. Well, I'm going to talk about the first time I did a marathon. Now I'm going to require you to suspend your disbelief. I don't look like I've been training for a marathon currently. But this is what I look like when I was out of shape after I did the marathon. And this is a picture of me at a military ball. My wife made me cut out the other girl because it was before I met her. She said she's not a jealous type, but actually now she's not a jealous type anymore. I think I was listed on Gumtree recently. She wouldn't put me on eBay because, you know, the Gumtree is where you get the lower quality products, you know. But anyway. So I was, at some point, you know, in decent physical condition. So this was between the second and third year of military university. And I was training for nationals. And I also had a slot in jump school that I was trying to get. So I needed to stay in shape. So I was visiting my uncle Carlo and my Aunt Florence in southern Illinois. And I said, Uncle Carlo, I need to go on a run. Where can I run around here? He goes, well, you can run on down. And there's from the southern Illinois. So like, you can run on down to the crossroads. That's a couple miles and run back. And I said, okay. So I went for a run. And I had my Walkman with us. So a lot of us are old enough to remember Walkman. Some of us aren't old enough, but you've seen it in Guardians of the Galaxy. So I got my Walkman. I remember the tape I was listening to. It was Def Leppard Hysteria. That's what it was. And I'm running. I get to the crossroads, and right before I get to the crossroads, which is a couple miles away, guess what happens? The tape stops. And I was like, what the I was really upset, because I'm like, you pathetic slug. How could you do, you're going to wash out of jump school? You're going to not get a scholarship? How could you you're dogging it. You know, you got to push yourself harder on the way back. So I turn around, I start running back harder. And I flip the tape over there, and while I'm running, I run back harder. And I get like 5 steps from the front door, and guess what? The tape stops. And I'm like, and I'm furious. So I'm like, you pathetic loser. So I run back, and it starts raining, and I'm running, and I remember clearly a couple cows looking at me going, what the hell is this guy doing? So I'm running in the rain, get to the crossroads. Of course, the tape doesn't flip over, so I'm like, doing good. Tape stops again. I'm like, God, using swear words that I can't say in polite company. Flip it over, put it in, keep running, and I'm pushing myself harder again. So I'm running back again. My dad comes out in the car. My dad was a Chicago cop. So sometimes he didn't present things in the kindest possible way. So he goes, what the hell are you doing? We're all waiting for you for dinner. What are you so goddamn inconsiderate? Blah, 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 blah. Just going off. get in the car. I'm like, no, I can't, I got to train. I got to get airborne school and got to stay in shape. And I'm running, and he's like, get in the car. I'm like, I can't, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, fine. And he drives back home. I get home, he starts yelling at me, where the hell you been? We're all waiting on you, and blah, 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 carrying on. And I go, well, I told the story, the tape had to flip over, and blah, 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 and I can't let down the family and fail, and I can't be embarrassed, and I got to, push myself, and blah, blah, blah. He goes, get in the car. We get in the car, we drive down to the crossroads. It's 4.3 miles. So that day I'd run 17 miles. On mistake. That's how bright I am. I'd never run 17 miles before. I'd never wanted to run 17 miles before. My goal was always to have enough money to afford a car. But that's when I learned. It's in our heads. It's in our heads. You think that was a big deal? Giannis Kouros, have you guys read about him? Read about him. But a lot of my friends were Marines, and they used to do these things called ultrathons, which were 100-mile runs minimum. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I got a car, no. But these are some of the runs he's done. He did a 1,000-mile run. It took him 6 days. It took him, 10 days, 10 hours, and 30 minutes. He did 1,000 miles, which is 1,600 kilometers? The Badwater Marathon is considered the toughest race in the world. It starts out in Death Valley. It's not called Death Valley because it's pleasant. Temperatures are 53 degrees Celsius at the start. It starts at the lowest point in the United States, and guess where they run to? The highest point in the United States. It's 135 miles or 212 kilometers. 53 degrees. By the time they get to the bottom of Mount Whitney, they are at the same altitude where pilots start to wear masks so they don't get hypoxia. It's a 135-mile run. Last year, a 65-year-old woman finished it. She went through 3 pairs of shoes. Do you know why? They melted. They melted. The oldest guy that's ever finished it is 79 years old. And a lot of the people, when he ran it this year, finished it at the age of 79, gave him a hard time for being a slacker. Because when he was 72, what he did is he did what's called, I forgot the name of it, it's in the posting, but he ran his 135 miles, 212 kilometers, and then you go all the way up to the top of Mount Whitney, you climb it, where you get 29% of the oxygen that we get at sea level. Then you climb down, and because 212 kilometers is not enough, guess what? You run back. And he finished. That's what he did when he was 72. The interesting thing about these ultramarathoners, the average ultramarathoner is 49 years old. 49. So does that mean it's about physical fitness? I don't think so. There's no way in hell you're going to convince me that you have the most potential physically as a 49-year-old male. This is because they've developed over their lifetime the mental toughness. Physical plays a part in it, don't get me wrong. But the head game is the hardest part. Here are the sources I use for the next 5 to 7 minutes of this talk, in case you guys think I'm making this stuff up or exaggerating. Associative identity disorder. What do we learn about that? Well, it's been studied for over 100 years. What is it? How do you get it? Well, it happens to people usually between the ages of 3 and 11 years old, where they're subjected to a repeated trauma, severe trauma, usually sexually and physically and mentally, all of it, over and over again. And what the personality does is it disassociates. We used to call this split personality disorder or multiple personality disorder. And a lot of interesting things happen. There can be as few as 2 personalities in the same body, or as many as 2,500. is the most severe case. The average is about 10. So you got 10 people in here. You think your head's busy. I got a lot going on and I can't get me head around it, mate. Whatever. 10 people in their head on the average. Usually there's one that's like a protector. There's usually one that's like the victim. There's usually one that's like the negotiator. There's usually one that's the abuser. I mean, they've got all, and there's usually, so there's all these different roles. And the roles will have different personalities. One will be right-handed, one will be left-handed. If you have a personality A, sign a document, the signature will look different with personality B. They can be male, they can be female, they can be a child, all in the same. The female that thinks they're a male will feel like they have male parts and move like they have male parts and sit like they have male parts. They'll forget. They're not aware of each other a lot of times. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times they aren't. They have amnesia. If there's 10 personalities, one of them will have good vision, the other one will need glasses. Sometimes there'll be 6 or 7 personalities that need different glasses, different prescriptions. So the person will literally have a stack of eyeglasses at home because they have to use a different one for a different personality. And they think it's because they got all these roommates. They do have roommates, but they're in here. Their actual facial muscles will move in such a way that they will look different sometimes to people that don't know them well. Okay, so you'll think maybe it's their brother instead of them. All this stuff you can explain, right? I mean, because it's in your brain. But let's go to some other stuff. I talked about all this already. This I put in for Moses. Moses, the guy who's running for Senate right now in the Republican ticket. His name is Herschel Walker. He's a football star, very successful entrepreneur. Guess what? He had this. He had one of them was called the warrior. One of his personalities he called the hero. He doesn't remember receiving the Heisman Trophy, which a lot of you guys don't like gridiron. That's cool, but that's the highest award you can get in university football, which is a big deal. Back to our good buddy Herschel Walker. So when he started integrating all these personalities, that's when he ended up playing Russian roulette, divorcing his wife, pulling a gun on her. Now apparently he's okay. All right? But about 1 in 10,000 people they think have DID to some extent. Now for the cooler stuff, so I can get to my real point. This stuff's all interesting, but I'm getting to a point, trust me. The eye. You remember this from high school biology? The way the eye works is the light goes in through there, it goes onto the lens, right? The lens splits it up, refracts it, it gets an image on the back, and then it transmits down the optic nerve, just like we learned in high school biology. Well, with people with multiple personality disorder, or DID, the ophthalmologists have done the studies of them while they switch personalities, the shape of their lenses in their eye actually changes. They'll have one personality that has a lazy eye, another one won't. They'll change eye color between personalities. They can change. This is all documented. Look it up. All the sources are there. You don't believe me? I'll email you. Allergies. They'll have one personality that's allergic to cigarette smoke. Then they'll have the next personality. They'll switch to a different personality. That one smokes. Cat allergies. There's documented evidence of people that have cat allergies. In one personality, they'll get a horrible rash. And the next personality, they play with the cat and they're a cat lover. This one I like is one of my favorite ones. A little boy they found who is allergic to citrus. One personality will be allergic to citrus, one isn't. He breaks out in a rash when he drinks citrus. Interesting thing. He'll be in the personality where he can drink citrus and he's not allergic to it. Then he'll switch to the other personality where he doesn't know what's going on. Remember, they got amnesia. They don't know what the other people in their head have been doing. And then he'll get a rash and not know why. Epilepsy medication will work on one personality being epileptic, one won't. If sometimes there'll be 5 personalities that have epilepsy, the medication will work on 2 or 3 of them, but not the other 2. So their physiology changes to a point where medications don't work. Diabetes. There are proven cases where people have diabetes. One personality has diabetes, the other doesn't. And the one will be an insulin-dependent diabetic. Not just a, take these tablets diabetic. A real take this shot or you're dead diabetic. And the other personality won't need insulin at all. Ketamine. You guys have all heard of ketamine, right? Hopefully you haven't used it or you'd be in prison. But ketamine, the tranquilizer. Studies where they take these, because a lot of times the people with multiple personality disorder or DID end up institutionalized. Let's get serious. They'll give ketamine to them when they're in one situation. There's a case where they give 5 milligrams of ketamine to this person, tranquilizes them. They switch personalities, they give them 100, it won't work. There's a case study where when they're in their different personalities, they have 4 distinct, unique brainwave sets. When they integrated this person, when they healed them as much as they could, they had a 5th one. It was not similar to the other 4 at all. Completely unique. This is my favorite one. There are more than one example of people that self-harm that have DID, where scars will literally appear, disappear, and reappear as they switch personalities. They will physically manifest scars. There's another case study where one of the personalities is a guy, he gets in a fight, his eye pops out in this fight, or it gets a detached retina, you know what that looks like, right? And this personality over here doesn't have it. He switches to that personality, pop. Then he goes back to the other personality, back in. Pops in and out. Now, my opinion now. Now it's time for my opinion. If you're someone that has the ability by your thoughts to control how different chemicals interact with your body, different medications, and if you're somebody that can physically manifest scars and make them disappear, to me that sounds like a superhero. Nobody else has said that, but that's what it sounds like to me. Now think about that for a second. If these people that are so traumatized, are so damaged, are so broken, can do these things with their mind, what can we do? Think about that. If that doesn't keep you awake at night, I suck. So key number 1 is, it's all in our head to adversity. I tell you right now, all these problems I've had, when I look back at them, I'm so mad at myself for making myself and everyone around me miserable. And I'm saying that with my sister-in-law in the room, so I know it's going to get back to my wife. It's all in our head. It's not that bad. We're making it that bad. So let's get real. I said all this before. It's all in your head. Let's move to our second point. You've seen these guys before, right? We got Bezos, we got Zuckerberg, we got the head of Google, all the big tech CEOs. They're always getting raked over the coals, aren't they? Let's just look at a couple. Bill Gates, here's Bill Gates a few years ago. Here's what he looks like now. Okay, why? So many antitrust laws, he can't even count them. Of course, being divorced doesn't help either. He's constantly criticized for his business practices. There was no such thing as even paying for software when he started the business. Look at our friend Jeff Bezos. Well, what's his life like? Well, he's got divorced too, but remember the Amazon fire disaster? That Amazon Fire phone, do you guys remember that? What a big bust that was. He's had books getting deleted. He's antitrust lawsuits. His workers say it's an unfair environment. He's blamed for destroying small businesses around the world. He's attacked for owning the Washington Post. He's vilified for sending people to space when apparently his workers are treated unfairly. On and on and on and on. Elon Musk, 3 divorces. Getting charged with sexual whatever right now. Every time he tweets, he starts an SEC investigation. That's the ASIC equivalent in the United States. Every year, he's been audited by the tax office that he can remember. This is what he says in an interview. He's had factory shutdowns in Tesla. His SpaceX employees are got one off. Lawsuit, 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 lawsuit. And then this Twitter debacle he's in right now.
About 16 children.
Yeah. I mean, go on. We can go on. All right? Our good friend Mark Zuckerberg. Multiple problems with business partners. You know, the Instagram founders left in protest. His CEO bolted. He's been hacked. He gets blamed for Cambridge Analytica, which was in the U.S. election. Data mining. He got caught for data mining 86 million customers. Hunter Biden suppressing that. He's blamed for the race riots we had, you know, letting him go on Facebook. COVID, both sides blame him for COVID-19 disinformation. He's got 2 antitrust lawsuits right now. They're trying to repeal his libel protection. You know, Forbes, which you guys have heard of Forbes, right? The financial magazine. They're laughing at him for this metaverse VR stuff that he's sinking tens of billions of dollars into. I could go on. Here he is in Congress. How would you like to be that guy in front of Congress and the press? Not fun. Doesn't look like a fun afternoon at the golf course to me, Peter. I think he needs a life enjoyment mentor right now. What do you think? I read this years and years ago in a book. I think it was by Stephen Covey. It might have been by Alan Loy McGinnis. I can't remember, but he made the point, be glad for all your problems because they pay at least half your salary. Because if somebody else could do those jobs, they wouldn't be worth the hundreds of billions of dollars they are. You guys own businesses. If the job is easy, what do? You find somebody who's not that bright, who you can pay very little. Yes or no? I mean, I wouldn't have had all the problems I had if I worked at McDonald's. If I hadn't have tried to go out and make something from nothing. All the problems I had are the reasons why we have money and a lot of property. Does that make sense? So you got to take those problems and go, hey, if I didn't have these, where would I be? All right, let's move to the third point. Wrestling. Ooh, I saw Stani kind of sit up when she saw this guy's arms. All right. Well, I used to wrestle in high school, not sumo wrestling, which you might believe. But, you know, the interesting thing in wrestling is you get 2 points for a takedown. That means dropping the guy to the mat. But you also get 2 points for a reversal. Getting out of trouble and getting back in control. So the point here is it doesn't matter where you are. It matters where you end up. So always be looking for the reversal. Give you a couple examples. Chesty Puller. You know who Chesty Puller is, Moses? Chesty Puller is a Marine. He's the most decorated Marine in U.S. history. He has 5 Navy Crosses. That's the highest award you can get. He has 1 Distinguished Service Cross, a Silver Star, Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, a bunch of other stuff. In the Chosin Pass in the Korean War, in 1950, he was surrounded. He was leaving a battalion. No, a division, pardon me. Division. He was surrounded. This is what he said. We've been looking for the enemy for some time now. We're surrounded. That simplifies things. He's also quoted, and I can't verify this, it might be an urban legend, but a lot of people say what he said was, "That's outstanding. We can fire in any direction and destroy the enemy." So what did he do? He was outnumbered 7-1. He let him out of it in minus 25-degree weather when he's low on ammunition, food, men, everything. He looked for the reversal. Thomas Edison, you know the whole thing about Thomas Edison tried 2,000 times to make the light bulb. Everybody knows that story, right? You know, he developed the phonograph and all these other, the first motion picture camera and all these other wonderful things, and he had 1,093 patents, the actual real number. Did you know that in 1914, when he was 67 years old, his factory and workshop with 13 buildings, because it was huge, burnt to the ground completely. Every prototype he had, all the research he had, all the products he had, everything burned to the ground. Everything. It cost $2 million at that time. And in 1914, $2 million in 1914 today translates to about 40 million US and about 60 million Australian. He was only insured, because all his buildings were concrete, for about 200 grand. So, as he's watching literally, his entire life's work go up in flames, 100 feet tall, because it was the film, the old film used to burn. You guys know that was very, they used to call it gun cotton, what they used to make the old films out of. Was he was watching it burn, he said to his son, who was standing with him, he said, "Son, go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire this big again." His son was like, "Oh my God, the old man's lost it." And he said, Dad. He goes, No, don't worry about it, son. We're just burning up a bunch of rubbish. That night, the New York Times was there, because you could see this fire for miles and miles. He was quoted as saying this: "I'm 67 years old, and tomorrow I'll start all over." The next morning he woke up at 5:30. The reports are, this is what he said to his family. I might miss a couple words, okay? But he said this, he said, "There's great value in disaster. All our mistakes have been burnt up." Now you might think he's just putting on the brave face, because that's what you're supposed to do when you're the leader, right? When you're the mom or the coach or the whatever, you're supposed to put on the brave face. But what happened? 2 days later, after the fire burnt down the entire factory, he noticed that while the firemen were trying to get it to put out the fire, they couldn't see really well. So he invented a powerful battery-operated flashlight. 3 weeks later, he had all his workers back to work in different factories. The next year, 1915, the fire was in December. He did $10 million in business, in revenue, which translates in today's dollars and Australian dollars as $500 million. Didn't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Key 3, look for the reversal. We're going to move quicker now. Einstein said this. He said, "If I only had an hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution." We have to think about the ways that we solve problems. I talked about this obliquely in the last session, where I talked about Rudy Giuliani, the book I read on leadership that he does, where he talks about getting all the information before making a decision when you're the leader. But you have to look at the problems from a different way and get all the information. He also said you cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them. Now, last time I promised you I was going to tell you a story about a Christmas ham. What we can learn about adversity. I changed my mind. Instead, I thought of a better story that I think it's better. It's about the space shuttle. You know how much I love the space program. These two things right here are called solid rocket boosters. Those two skinny things right there. When they designed the solid rocket booster for the space shuttle, they wanted to make them a lot wider than they are, but they had to make them that width. Why? Because the manufacturer had to take them by train from the plant to the VAB, that's the Vehicle Assembly Building, in NASA in Florida. So they had to go through this tunnel, this railway tunnel. Now, these rails here are 4 feet, from memory, 8.5 inches thick. Wide, excuse me. Why? And so the tunnel is just made to go around that. Why is it so thick? Why is it that distance? Why? Why is it so close? Well, because the rails made in the United States were made by the people that made the rails in England. And the people who made the rails in England, the guys that designed the railroads, were also the people that did the trolley rails. They used the same tools. Why did the people that used the trolley rails use that measurement? Well, those people did it based on the wagons of the time. And the wagons of the time were based on all these roads around England that have all these big ruts in them. Why do they have these big ruts? Well, these roads were made by, guess who? The Romans. And the Romans Why did they make the roads with that kind of rut? Well, that was based on a Roman war chariot, because they had to get their armies around to conquer the world and subjugate people, right? And how did they decide to make the wheelbase of a Roman war chariot that size? Well, because that's about the approximate width of 2 horses' asses. So, what do we learn from this? That the most sophisticated piece of machinery up until that point in mankind's history, with billions of working parts, costing billions of dollars launch, taking humanity to places they've never been, to do things they've never done, is based, the design is based on 2 horses' asses. So what's key 4? Key 4 is focus on your approach to the problem. Don't overcomplicate things. And don't do them the same way just because that's the way it's always been done. Use your brain. 343 BC. Alexander the Great, you've heard of him, right? When he invaded Persia, he burnt the ships. He burnt all his ships when he landed in Persia. Persia was the mightiest and the greatest empire the world had ever seen at that time. He burned his ships, and to tell his men, there's no going back. You better win. He was outnumbered 5-1 and far, far away from home. But he did win, or I wouldn't be talking about him. 207 BC, Jiang Yu did the same thing. And except he burned all his ships, and he made his troops destroy all their supplies except for 3 days' worth. Because he said, you better win. He was outnumbered 10-1 at one point. I've got a book, and I brought it with me. I left it over here. It's called History's Worst Decisions. I read this years ago. And it's got things like Mao starving tens of millions of Chinese when he forcibly collectivized the farms, Chernobyl, all kinds of great blunders. Okay? It's a book about stupidity. Guess who the only person in here twice is? Winston Churchill. The only person in there twice. Think of all the dumb stuff he did. The Bengal famine, Gallipoli, the way he vilified Gandhi. We can go on. But what's he remembered for? Is he remembered for any of these failures? No. He's remembered for this. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We will never surrender. That's what he's remembered for. That's why, again, for I don't know how many times, this year he was voted in a BBC poll the greatest Briton of all time. Why? Because these people all have the attitude, failure is not an option. 6, last key point. Hannibal in 218 BC crosses the Alps with 30,000 men, 15,000 horses, and I believe 38 elephants. Because Italy thinks, nobody can attack us from that side. I mean, come on, are you serious? In the winter? Crosses the Alps for 15 years, lays waste to Rome and its provinces. Why? Because he was bold. Back to business. I'm friends with the guy that brought these to Australia. He was in China. He saw these little fidget spinners. He said, oh my God, and he bought every single one of them he could get. He took them to the Sydney Royal Show. Like 3 weeks later, paid the super exorbitant, stupid air freight for these little junky pieces of plastic. Profited 800 grand in 13 days. Speed wins. Or, as we know in Latin, and from Virgil, fortune favors the bold. That's key number 6. And the last thing I want to leave you here in the next 2 or 3 minutes with is, you are bold. Almost every single person in this room is a business owner, or they're in entertainment, or they're a political activist, or they're doing things that other people have been telling them their whole life is stupid. You can't do it. Are you serious? You're not going to make money at that. What do you mean? Are you dumb? You hear it over and over and over again. And some of us have been through the hoop how many times? So the point is that we've been told this stuff over and over again. But this is the kind of people in this room that don't listen to the naysayers. Elvis was told by Decca Records, go back to driving a truck. You suck. Marilyn Monroe was told she was no good actress. Fred Astaire was told that he could barely dance. Walt Disney went bankrupt 7 times and was fired for never having original ideas. True. But what do we learn from this? Okay, we learned that there are 2 types of people in the world. We learned that there are a type of people that face adversity. We all face it. Everybody in this room is going to have adversity and more. You're going to have more. It's going to come tomorrow or the next day or next year, whenever. Sorry, it's going to happen. But there are 2 kinds of people in the room and 2 kinds of people in the world. There's the kind of person that when it happens is going to sit down and cry and give up and go, I can't do it. It's too hard, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the kind of person that's going to find a way, who's going to be discouraged, but is not going to give up, who's going to figure out what they need to do to reach their objectives, to hit their goals, and in business, take care of themselves and their family. And my question to you is the same as always. Which one of those type of people are you? That's it. Thanks for coming.